Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
Welcome. This is Koji, and this is episode number 17. I want my child to be confident, to think he can take over the world, but I don't want him to be too confident. I don't want him to be an asshole, an arrogant person. I don't want to be. It's funny when I was young, I thought I was the boss of everything. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was the man. But now the older me, I realize I don't know anything. I guess it's just a function of living a long time. So to help me talk about confidence versus arrogance, I brought on my fellow podcaster and musician, Steven Ricks. How are you?
Hey guys. Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much, Koji. This is so great. I love that you said that you want to raise an asshole. Of course, it's just like such a crazy thing that like it's trying to figure out like the difference between like confidence, arrogance, and like okay, like how do we balance it out? We can talk about that today.
Yeah, cool. Definitely. Let's talk about that. And then, but before we get into it, let me tell us a little bit about you. I was a guest on your show, but I would love to hear a little bit about you and about your podcast.
Yeah, so I do a show called the Poema PDX, and that's just about creatives. So anyone that's in podcasting, film, photography, any audio. So that's what we're doing there, is helping people collaborate as well as build a team to be able to do what they are supposed to do in life. Like I think it's really hard to go at it alone, and we're not supposed to as people. So when we actually come together as creatives, we actually get to create really good product, really good work as well. And we have a physical space out in Portland, so that's what we're up to now, just kind of creating and collaborating with other creatives.
And you're a musician, right?
Yep, so I'm a drummer. I play guitar as well. I've been playing drums for about 15 years, playing guitar for about 7 years, did a bunch of tours with different bands, did the whole 9 yards when it comes to being on like a musician and artist. Now I'm like more so, I got my degree in audio engineering, so love more so like the production of it as well as just the quality and the excellence of it. So that's where I'm at now. It's like I'm no longer in the touring life because that was just crazy. You have all the stories, of course, but now it's just like, hey, I want to like be a man for my family as well as to, you know, just really hone in on the artists now that want to go out and do that stuff, because I'm almost 30 now, and you know, when I was back in being 15 through 27, just having that like on the road kind of experience, it's great, but like it's really a big hype game as well. So like now I'm like, hey, I just want to like help encourage people to go out there and to create music or whatever they want to do. So now I'm back in the studio, more along the lines of just like helping people create, mix, beats, production of like live music or any kind of like hip hop or rock, anything like that.
That's awesome. Thank you. So why don't we get into it? Why don't you start to tell with your first piece of advice around confidence versus arrogance?
Yeah, so confidence and arrogance is a really interesting kind of situation, because people can either be like completely over the top arrogant and like, oh yeah, I'm like the best of everything, or they can be this extreme of like, well, I'm just super humble and just can't ever talk about myself. But in between both of those, there is a beautiful medley called confidence. So having confidence in yourself as a person really comes down to the point of you can hone your craft, you know what you're doing, but you don't have to be an ass about it. You don't have to like be like, oh, I know everything. Coming to a posture of like understanding that you are actually able to work alongside other people, as well as you're able to like understand that you're not everything you think you are, and you can always learn. So if we come from that position of like, we know we're doing, but we want to like always be on that learning trajectory, we're going to come into that space of understanding. People want confident people. They don't want to be like, oh, I know everything, walk into the door and they're like, wow, this guy just knows everything. Like I can't teach him anything. And if he comes in that with that kind of perspective or assumption, then he's not moldable, teachable. So I think as you understand, like confidence is really good and self-confidence is key. But if you're being arrogant, you're just gonna be shutting doors left and right. You're gonna be having people be like, yeah, I'm gonna avoid that guy. He's just really all about himself and doesn't even want to have anyone come around him. And that's where I'm like kind of at in that situation or sphere of understanding that it's so important to have confidence and for people to be like meek too. Like people are like, oh, well, like just don't go the exact opposite direction, because if you just think you don't know anything or don't know anything or don't know like about, I don't know, like just how to live life and function as a human, what are you gonna do? Like sit in your house and be depressed? So you have to have like some kind of like confidence to be able to get up, get out, do the thing, and like enjoy it and like have a lot of pride in your work. Having pride in your work is important, because if you don't have pride in what you're doing, you're not gonna ever like want to do it to the best of your ability.
Yeah. That's great. Actually, funny because I teach screenwriting I'm a professor of screenwriting sometimes, and one of the things that was funny is I run into students when I correct their work, they'll tell me, "Oh, I've written 5 screenplays or whatever," and I just was like, "Wow, that's crazy." Because even though I'm teaching screenwriting, I still take screenwriting classes. I still go out there, I still learn from people, and I don't go to that class and be like, "I'm the expert of screenwriting." No, I go to that class, and whether I take anything from it or not, I still learn. I still want to listen to that person's advice. I still want to, like I could always learn more stuff. So it's always really interesting when I hear those people. But
yeah, it's such a, just a second before we jump into the next thing. But like, yeah, as a professor, like you're always learning from your students, because time is always changing. Like you're learning from a different generation and like how they learn, how they grasp things. Because as you know, as people that are in the music or the film world, like our clientele is so different all the time. And we're dealing with people that are like, okay, they were born like back in the 80s or before then, or like even people that were born in 2000 that are like now 20 years old. And I'm like, wait, like you guys were born in 2000. And I have to like figure out how to connect and like talk to you and understand your kind of worldview, and without saying like I'm just being a complete jerk to you, because like they're very sensitive. And like having understand like the confidence, and like if you're overly confident with someone, they can actually be intimidated by that too. So like it's like that kind of space of understanding that they have to have the balance of like reading the person, understanding that we have to take things from their perspective as well, and have to understand that we are all in this like kind of situation or like life together. And I think arrogant person, they just put the whole world, and they're like, oh, I'm the only person in the world, and like this is it, it's all about me show. And I'm like, if it's all about you, then I'm out of here. Like, why am I even here if it's all about you? So
well, and my advice, my first piece of advice is similar to your advice. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term arete. It's a Greek term. It's one of my favorite terms, and it's the definition is basically to strive for excellence. That you're always striving to be the best at not just one thing, but everything. You're the best at math, you're the best at science, you're best at sports, you're best at whatever you're doing, everything you're doing. But here's the turn, which is that the thing about arete is you can never achieve arete. You're always striving for it. And in the moment you think you've achieved arete, you run into hubris, which is to believe that you're better, right? Than to believe. Hubris is like means that you believe that you're godlike, which we could never be. Right. And so I think that there's a fine line between arete and hubris, but I think that the goal for us, all of us, is to strive for that best, but understand that if we ever think we're there, that we've gone past that, and we're kind of falling on somewhere else. So I always keep the idea of arete. And one time I thought about putting it, tattooing it, but I haven't tattooed that one. But it's something that I think is really, really important, And the good thing, what I like about it is that it's not just whatever we want to do, but it's like everything we do, everything we put our minds to, we do. Like, so it doesn't matter if it's like, I'm not into math, but when I'm doing math, I'm going to try my hardest. I'm going to be the best I can.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's like the kind of myth of perfection. Like everything's like, oh, like this is perfect. Like, no, like perfect. We can't even like understand that in this world, because we're always striving to be better. Like, and even if we can like see it, or like it is like perfect in our own perception, it's just all about like your own personal preference. Like, and I think like the person I think of the most when I think of like someone that strives to continually make things better is Elon Musk. Like he's like taking things, he's like, oh, like I want to like create all these things that are energy efficient and physical, and like have all these kinds of like belief patterns, but he has constantly been like, no, I want to push beyond this. I want to create all these kinds of vehicles and spaceships and all this kind of like transportation so that it's more efficient. But he's always pushing beyond the quote unquote status quo and like wanting to make something in his personal lens perfect, but it's never gonna be perfect because he's like, I want it to be better. And if we live in that kind of arte and hubris kind of, yeah, it's okay. If we live in that kind of place, like we're actually gonna find like a good like yin and yang kind of like position where we're like, okay, like this can always get better, but am I okay with releasing this to the world as a producer? I'm like, okay, like I can make this a little bit better, but like if I just wanted to strive for perfection, I would never release anything because I would be like, man, I can always do this and do this, but like it's always in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Where that kind of like competency comes in and that confidence, like, okay, like I'm confident this will sound good. And if I'm like really nitpicking everything about it, I'm never going to get anywhere with it, you know?
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, let me hear your second piece of advice.
Ooh, my second piece of advice that is just off the cuff. I love it. So
unless you don't, I mean, we could keep talking back and forth. It doesn't, I mean, it's up to you how you want to.
Yeah. I think my next piece of advice would be to not take yourself so seriously. I think a lot of times we can be our own worst enemy. And I think if that kind of comes kind of into play with all this, but at the same time, like if we think that we are so good or bad, like either way, we can really do either really great things or we can do really bad things. And if we just say, hey, like I'm putting my best foot forward always, and I like want to do it, even if it looks super crazy or stupid, like I'm giving my best in it. Like I think that's what matters the most. So like don't take yourself so seriously in this kind of way because yeah, life is always going to be in that kind of pendulum swing of extremes of highs, lows, and like just the normalcy, quote unquote. But if we can just like understand that what we're doing and whatever we put our hand to or putting our work towards is going to be like excellent, and that's all that matters. And I think that's a really good spot to like live out of, because if we try so hard to be something that we may not ever achieve to be, we might just end up going like into a freaking pandemic kind of like culture of like never wanting to leave our house and like wanting to go buy a freaking beach house and like never wanting to go anywhere around society because we're so afraid of our own reflection or of the world's perception of us. And I think that's like a really sobering thing to think of, like, hey, like it's okay to take yourself not so seriously and to understand that we're all in the same struggle bus as people, like learning every day, learning how to be normal, whatever the heck that word means. Like it's been said that there's a new normal coming out of this, but like we never even defined what normal was before this even happened. So like if we can understand that we're always in process, we're always learning, and like if we can just take a little bit of the edge of it and like hey, like we're all in this together, like we can laugh at the stupid shit that happens. We can like understand that things happen for a reason. A lot of them are out of our control, and things that we can control is literally just ourselves and how we respond to things. So if we could just like, yeah, just not take yourself so seriously when things get hard or things get crazy, and like understand that it's okay to laugh it off, and it's okay to like understand that we're all human and we all have our own shit to like spew.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of not taking yourself seriously, because I do think that, you know, especially in the beginning of my career, in the beginning, I'm sure a lot of creative people's careers, everyone takes themselves so seriously, and any kind of criticism, any kind of comments are like, they hurt you so much. But as I've gotten older, I'm just kind of like, wow, they just didn't like my writing. They just didn't like this, or, you know, it's like, I can't really spend that much time worrying about it because there's always haters out there. There's always people out there who aren't going to like it. And part of that is just being like, not saying like I'm an artiste, but more of like, you know, yeah, I'm doing what I think is right, you know, and at the time I thought was right. And whether it turned out perfectly at the end or not, that's what it is. It's just art. And, you know, and that's the thing that people forget, is that art's never perfect. Like you said earlier, art's never perfect. So, you know, I mean, you know, I could keep doing the same thing over and over, or I could keep exploring other new things.
Yeah. And I think just understanding that like I don't know, like we have our own stuff to like bring to the table. So like, yeah, art's never gonna be perfect. It's in the eye of the beholder. Things that Van Gogh or different kinds of like painters release. I'm like, what were they on when they released this? But in their mind, that was like perfect to them.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a way odd expression. Just like for podcasts out there that are like, these guys are talking about random stuff, like they're doing these things like, but this is what creates the value for them.
Yeah.
So like if we continue to be our true self and understand who we are and like not take ourselves so seriously, we're going to find our sea of people, our target audience that are actually going to be like, hey, like I can resonate with these guys. These guys are really talking about some good stuff here. And the rest of the people, they are just going to continue to go on their own path. Like, so if we just understand that whatever the heck we're doing, like the people that support us are going to love us. They're going to support it. And the other people that are just wanting to throw shade and throw all this like naysaying stuff out there, then cool. Like that's just shows that they have nothing better to do with their time, or they just like, they just want to waste their energy. It's just wasted time on their point and their part. And I think what you just said was like important. Just like, yeah, we can really waste our energy and time on things that don't matter. Like the people, like if we are as creatives, like, hey, I don't want to like do this because I'll get all this criticism, then you know what? Like that's just life. If we can walk outside and get criticized for whatever, or we just expect something to go a certain way and it doesn't because we're not as big as we think we are.
Yeah.
And a lot of times like we just can be so be so set in our way, Well,
and I think also that it's not always up to us how it turns out at the end anyway. Like one of my actually somebody else was on here, Jamie Ford. He's a writer up in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying like, sometimes your material could become a zeitgeist, could become a famous and could become a moment, or something that's really great could just kind of nothing will ever happen with it. And it's not, and there's really nothing you could do to control that, like even with a lot of money in PR or zero PR budget, it's you just never know, right? Like it could hit with a lot of money, or it could hit with no money, or it could fail with a lot of money, or it could fail with no money. So it's really interesting, and you can't really worry about that. But similar to that kind of world, one of the ways for me to keep from getting overconfident or arrogant about things is to have a mentor or somebody who will tell me the truth. Not even a mentor, someone who tells me the truth. And I always go back to my man Tupac and Biggie. And when I look at those two guys, Biggie had Puff, right? Who would tell him the truth. He'd say, hey, this song's whack, re-record it, do this, right? And then if the song wasn't good, he'd make him re-record. Whereas everyone in Tupac's life, there was no one in Tupac's life like that would tell him the truth. That's why I love Tupac. He's my hero, but half his songs are unlistenable, because it's just not, he just put out everything. And he really needed that guy or that person to say, hey, Pac, re-record this, do a new hook. Let's do a new, let's get somebody else on it. Let's do something, and I think to me, it's just a matter of having that one person who's not like, especially if this is especially important if you're famous, but even if you're not famous, having that one person who's willing to tell you the truth, this is whack, redo it, or this is great, you're on the right path, and not some fan person, because those are the worst.
Yeah, exactly. And I think having like that kind of like space where you allow someone to talk into your life and speak into your life in whatever you're doing in your creative life or in your personal life, and like having someone that can just like kind of like just lead you into like a better path or whatever and help guide you along the way. Because like I'm not the best version of myself by myself. I have to like have many people speaking to my life like, what are you doing, Steven? Or what's this podcast about? Dude, like this makes zero sense. And I'm like, whoa, like, okay, let me just like figure out and recalibrate this. Because a lot of times, like as the artist or as the performer, like we don't know, we're in the moment. Like we're all about like capturing that moment. So like if people are not able to resonate with the moment or not able to capture it in the same way, I'm like, I gotta fix something, which is fine. Like I just want, which I can fine tune it. I don't have to be like, oh, like woe is me kind of like crap. I can be like, hey, like I'm actually gonna take the time to go around and go and like better myself, which is like that kind of space of being a better person as you're able to like be more rounded.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's awesome in my head. And then what comes out in the beginning, it's like, it's like when I talk to my students about writing, I never show anybody my first draft because it's not good, right? It's just not there. Even though I think it's awesome, it's not there. And I show them my 10th draft and I say, this is my first draft, because because if I say this is my 10th draft, that's like saying, like, a lot of times they'll feel like, oh, I'm not going to be able to give you any comments because you spent so much time on it. But in reality, what I want to hear, I want to hear your comments. I wouldn't show it to you if I wouldn't want your comments. So I'll tell you it's my first draft, so you feel like it's okay to like make comments, tell me the truth about things, because, but on the flip side of this, I would like to say though, that sometimes as an artist, it is important to hear that you're awesome. And so I think that that's cool. And what I usually do is I tell people I give people the comments I want. Mm-hmm. So like, if I was like, hey, Steven, here, read my script. I'm kind of down right now because everyone's like shitting on my stuff. I'll be like, hey, just tell me I'm a good writer. That's all I want. The great thing about that is you don't even have to read it. You can just say, that's awesome. I always tell my students when I'm reading their stuff that's not related to class, I tell them, what do you want from me? Do you want me to tell you you're awesome? Because I don't have to read it. But if you want me to tell you that, what kind of truth do you want to hear? Do you want to hear from truth from like as a producer? Do you want to hear truth as a friend of yours? Do you want me to hear truth as a person who might buy this? Because those are all very different, right? As you know, right? It's all very, very different. So I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it also like pushes you too, because there's artists and like different kind of films that like really like made it, and they like went really far, and you're like, wow, like how do I redo this? Like how do I recapture this moment? And like you have to understand, like you as an artist or as a person, they're always have like those peaks in like those kind of places where you like have like high record sales or high film watches or whatever it looks like, or even high streams of whatever. And when you understand like, hey, like I want to continue to build on this, that's the place of like confidence. You're like, wow, like I built this and it got 5 million streams. Awesome. Now let's shoot for 10 million streams. Yeah. And like, let's try to figure out how to do, and whatever it looks like, or let's try to go be with Universal or Sony or whoever, and like have like a really great film. And even if you can't get to that point again, like you can be like, dang, I created this, and like that's my best piece. And like, don't be like, man, I'm the best and blah, 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 like an arrogant like asshole, but like be like, man, I was able to like actually learn. I learned a lot from this piece because people loved it, or they liked it and like went and they bought it and they were able to come back and be like, man, it's really impacted my life in this really awesome way. And I'm like, cool, like thank you so much. And now I'm like wanting to figure out, okay, do I want to like go remake that, or like let that be, and like let that just be that thing? Because if like Tupac is so good because like he just shared his life, and the things that you can share like that were unreleased, they were just too people to understand or to like be able to comprehend, because his life was just all about the hood. Like he was just all in that kind of like raw space of just telling it how it is, and people are like, yo, this is crazy, bro, you gotta like turn it down a notch. And he's like, no, like this is what needs to be released. And like with him having people coming into his life and telling him this stuff, like we as the artist or as the person like have the responsibility to respond and be like, hey, like this is actually like what I want to do, or this is actually like, like how I want to do this, and like how can I reorient my own art so that people can like actually resonate with it. And that's the place of like confidence and like bettering yourself, instead of being like, no, you know what, screw you, and like I want to do my own thing, and like this is who I am, and like they can either accept me or they can hate me, and like that's that like kind of fun kind of battle with confidence, arrogance, and also like not taking yourself seriously in all through those capacities.
Yeah, that's great. Well, do you have another piece of advice around this?
Oh man, shoot. I think you have a piece of advice to give out, huh?
All right, so here's my piece of advice. I think it's put yourself in positions to lose. That you always want to think that you could beat everybody, but that you can't assume you're going to beat everybody. And by putting yourself in positions to lose, and positions to lose could also mean, taking risks, that you're going for something that's different or new. So that's why I'd never go after an artist who changes genres, or musical artists change genres, or somebody who writes something different. I think everyone wants to pigeonhole you, and and the safe thing for you is just to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and try to make a career out of it. But my thing is, one of the best ways to be confident, or not to be overconfident, is to push yourself and put yourself in places that you can fail, because failure is not necessarily a bad thing. It's only if you let it be a bad thing, right? And the only way you become the best is by pushing that, and it's like that whole Michael Jordan or Kobe or any of these things that, these guys are like, they miss like half their shots, but they have to shoot it, like that's why even with my, my son, we were having a conversation about his teammates, and his teammates were scoring more than him. And I was like, it's just because they're shooting more. If you shot that much, you'd make that many points too, And I think as an artist, we're all so precious about our work, but it's like, I think you need to keep working and keep pushing yourself.
Yeah. And failure is learning. Like at the end of the day, like, sure, like they have to take so many shots as basketball players to be able to make or not make things. But then when they're in that moment, like when it matters, like they know what it feels like to actually take that shot and be like, yep, that's going in. Or like, oh, okay, like, dang, I should have redone this. Like they know what it feels like to have a 3-pointer go in, or to be able to like just rush the hoop, all that stuff. So like that kind of situation comes with just continually practicing and going in without thinking about the failure. I think a lot of times we can overcompensate on the word failure and like make it so daunting, so big, when like failure is actually a good thing, because we're learning like what doesn't work, learning about ourselves, how we respond to it, how we can grow as people, and like also like what actually is our true like position. Like if I put Shaq in to be playing like just 3-pointers all day, that would be a big failure move on my part, because like because I can watch him during practice and be like, dude, this guy can't make a 3 for anything, but he can dunk on people all day. So like if I was able to like not I don't know, like trial and error with him and be like, hey, like let's put you as an offensive guard, let's have you just play up forward, I don't even know, but like all these different kinds of like positions, and be like, yep, this is not you, and this is where you can shine, and like you're a huge guy and we're able to do this. Or like different kinds of musical pieces. I think that's a very hard thing to get really well at. I don't think you can ever master music or art, because it's so abstract and so gray, and there's so much work to be done all the time. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, like we can just have really excellent pieces, and we can like continually grow in our craft. Yeah. And like if we can be agile and be able to be like, hey, like, because as an artist, like we have to be agile, because if we're playing live and we see that this whole thing is just like going to go like a production in the studio, then we're screwed. Because when we play live, there's variables everywhere that can fail. Like a guitar string can break, drumsticks can break, drum heads can break. Don't even talk about the sound stuff or the venue itself or the acoustics or whatever. And like we have to be like, okay, like I've had a show where I was playing like full on, and like a freaking blackout came in LA, and I was like, cool, like this is really ridiculous. And then we're like, okay, we're gonna just like have a spotlight with everyone's phones on. We're gonna play acoustic set, and like we just like went and stripped it down from a full-on rock concert to an acoustic set, and we just had like makeshift. And we're like, hey, like that was actually a lot better, because we weren't like, okay, guys, show's canceled. Like everyone was like, man, I got to really have an experience with this band, and I was able to just really love knowing them, because they're not gonna be like, all right, guys, get out of here. Like we were like, no, this is a crazy opportunity for us to learn how to transition from something that we weren't even expecting to happen,
Yeah. And I think that's where confidence comes from, is that knowing that you could do it. So even the basketball analogy with the 3-pointer, the confidence is knowing that if you take that shot in the right place, in the right mind, you're going to be able to make it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's like a really important thing, because confidence only is established or grown with a ton of failure. Because if we have to fall down to know what it feels like to ride like a bike or to walk, like I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I was just born walking. Like, no, like you, as you're watching your son, like he's someone that, had to walk and had to crawl before he walked. And like, before that, it was like carrying it everywhere, all this kind of situation. You're like, dude, you weren't born running out of the hospital.
Well, and it's scary. I think it's scary starting. I tell people all the time that when I first start a new script or a new whatever project, it's always really scary. Mm-hmm. But the confidence where the confidence builds is when I start writing it and I start getting into it, that's when I really, I get in my element and I'm okay. And I know what I'm doing. It's like in the Super Bowl, they script the first set of offensive plays so that they know what they need to do. And then after that, they kind of go back to their normal thing. It's just that beginning part, and I think the more time you put yourself in that position to lose, the more times you put that your position to fail, the better you're going to handle it when something comes up, because especially when it's like, for me, it's like every time I start something, it's like, it's scary. Cause like, I don't know if I could write this. I don't know if I could do this. I've never written anything like this before. So, for me, that's a really scary situation.
Yeah, and it's scary, but I think it comes back to like that one thing is just like not taking yourself so seriously, understanding that we're all fish in this large ocean. And like when you come into that kind of realization of the world's huge, there's 1 billion plus people on it, like, and we're going to create one podcast or one script or whatever like that. Like, hey, like if you're just starting something and like, hey, hats off to you. That's awesome. Like I think that's more along the lines of like, take the risk and learn from the process. And like another thing that I want to like add into this is like embrace your process, like fully hone it and like just own your process and like don't be so fixated on the result, because I think a lot of times like we can become arrogant because we put the horse before the carriage so much of the time, or before the cart or whatever it's called. And like within that kind of context, like we are like, oh, like, I want to become super rich and be famous and all this stuff. But then like if you already are thinking like that when you just started, you're going to become, if you would get to that point, like you're going to be a really awful human being, first of all, like sad to say, because your whole ambition, your whole desire is to be in this position all about you. And I think if we come into it like, hey, like I want to just try this and I want to like learn, I want to grow, boom, like that's a posture of being able to be humble as well as to be able to like be confident in what you're learning and having people come around you that are way ahead of you. And you're already saying like, hey, I need help. And like, I want to help other people around me too. And I want to like be better every single moment of my career or of my life so I can like make badass art or make a great career in whatever company or corporation your son wants to work in.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're toward the end of the show. So why don't you do you have any final pieces of advice, just anything in life that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just would say just the things that we talked about in this show are like really heavy and like heavy hitters for like how to like go about being a better version of yourself. But I think it's just like understanding that like you can only be you. And I think that's important. Like there's only one you. So like don't try to be someone you're not. And I think that's like really important, especially in the world today where we have social media everywhere. We have noise coming from every direction. And everyone's saying, hey, like do this, sign up for this, subscribe to this. Like, hey, like you don't have to like succumb to any of that like propaganda bullshit. You can actually be yourself and like be the best version of you and like understand that you have worth and have value in whatever you're going to do. Like just do it super well and that'll make the best impact.
Well, that's crazy because we've done 17 shows and I just realized I think that's the first time anybody's ever said that, including me, which is just to be you. I mean, I think that's a really great piece of advice, because it's especially nowadays. It's like you look on social media, you want to be like everybody else, you want to be like the Kardashians or whatever. But in reality, like most of us don't have that opportunity. Most of us aren't going to be this, aren't going to be that, or and you're not. Just everyone's different, I think that's really great advice.
Hey, thanks, man. I just think it's so important just to understand that you're only yourself and like whatever you do with excellence, like it's going to make a great impact into the world. And like, I think your son will really like impact from that because as we're going into the world where people are glued to their phone or computers or screens everywhere they go, like it's so easy to get lost in that process of like just being your true self and like letting that be enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's hard for me. I think I'm addicted to my phone. So maybe I need to.
I think we all are. So like taking a little social media like break or like just being able to just be present with people that we love or whoever it is. So like going out in nature is like so good to unwind and reconnect and reevaluate like what truly matters. So yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Where can people follow you? Where can they follow the podcast?
Yeah, so we have a website. So it's Poiema, so POIEMA PDX.com. We're Poiema PDX on Facebook, Instagram. Feel free to send us an email as well if you want to be on this show. We're looking for more podcast interviews as well as people that want to collaborate and create things, whether you're in film or music or video or not video, photography or podcasting. So you can just reach out to us at POIEMAPDX@gmail, and we'll get back to you as pretty quick right now. So we're all everything's slowed down, so it's pretty nice. We can be super available for all you guys.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe to our podcast. Please let people know about the podcast. If you'd like to be on the show, just let me know. Also, so follow us on our socials. I think our social is what is our social? Guy Code Pod on Instagram and Facebook. I don't know. There's too many podcasts. There's too many social medias I have to follow. But find us, follow us, and make sure to tell a friend. Thank you. Thank you, Steven. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, man.
And have a great day, night, whenever you're listening. Bye, guys. Look, my hand. Wait, where's my hand? Ooh, there's my hand.